Hi, folks. So glad you're here. Thank you for bearing with us here at the YWCA. We are trying something new, and as you can imagine, sometimes technical difficulties prove challenging. But we're here now. So thank you all for joining us. I'm glad some other people can pop on. Apologize for the delay. But let's get started because everyone's time is valuable. My name is Sarah Graham. I'm the Communications and Advocacy Manager here at the YWCA National Capital Area. And I'm really excited to have you all join us for our first ever Instagram Live for the Week Without Violence. For more than 20 years, YWCA set aside a week in October, and we all joined together and across the country as part of a global movement to end gender-based and community violence. So today, I'm really excited to welcome Ryan B. Nickens, of the TraRon Center. She was born and raised in Ward 8 in Washington, D.C., and her personal experience with gun violence has guided her efforts to ensure families and communities affected by gun violence have resources to help them deal with their trauma. In 2017, she founded the TraRon Center to help kids affected by gun violence heal through the arts. Currently, the center supports kids through a creative arts therapy program in Ward 7 and 8. They also provide therapy and mental health services for those directly and indirectly impacted by gun violence. And she also works to educate, engage, and empower the community through activism. So, welcome, Ryan. We are very glad to have you here. Let's get this conversation started.
Yeah.
We'll start out. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the center?
Well, thank you. I thank you to those Black Wealth Wellness and to Ashley McMaster, who's one of our generous donors. It's great to see you all as we stroll up. So, as Sarah said, I started the center in 2017, and I started the TraRon Center for the 8-year-old me, who was an 8-year-old in Ward 8, who for the first time heard gunshots and for the first time saw a person's body inflicted with gunshots. And this was a man, and I remember that day so vividly, a man laying on the ground by a fire hydrant with half of his face blown off. And
wow.
Remembered that day as an 8-year-old, and then I began, and then my family and it hit my family. My uncle was walking from my grandma's house to my aunt's house, and he was shot and killed when I was 12. And if there was, it just seemed like it kept going. 2.5 years later, my family was attacked by our next door neighbor, and my pregnant sister Tracy, was killed. And a couple of years later, my brother Ronnie was killed. And so I come to this work, to the work of gun violence, and not necessarily to the work of gun violence, but to the work of healing. Because I think healed people do not hurt people. And so I come to this work of healing from a place of wanting and needing that healing growing up. In my own life, coming to it, wanting to see my community and my city healed and whole, and knowing that there are some things that we need to do if we want to get rid of communal gun violence in our city. It's looking at the systemic issues. And so the TraRon Center, while it is, yes, a place of healing for elementary and middle school kids who are the most ignored, but they're the most ignored of those impacted by gun violence, because folks think they're kids and we label them resilient and they'll get over it. But then there are trillions of books about childhood trauma and therapy bills that say they won't get over it, and resiliency is a bunch of bullcrap. When you got to go to a therapist to help do that, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah, and so that resource wasn't there in our communities, and the 8-year-old in me decided to create what I believed we needed, and for the voices of children to be heard.
Wow. That thank you so much for sharing both a little bit about your story, but also why it's important, and that healing should be part of this anti-violence process. Um, this is a big question that we ask every week without violence, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. What does a world without violence look like to you?
Wow. A world without violence. It looks like, the song Kumbaya, my Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
peaceful. It is a space where folks are loved, are seen, and valued. Um, that we are a community and we're looking out for each other, right? We teach our kids at the TraRon Center that our donors aren't just folks who push a button on our website, and our volunteers aren't just people who show up once a week or whatever, but there is a sense of community from everyone who's taken an interest in the TraRon Center, whether donors, volunteers, um, our staff, that we are a community of people who share values and morals, and we love each other. And so we redefine community not by um, geographics, that you're my next door neighbor, but that we have a shared value system and we want to see the best for each other. And so we come together and we work together for those things. And that is what I believe. I am a woman of faith. Um, and I believe that is what God's beloved community looks like,
Wow.
people taking care of each other. And for me, that's what a world without violence looks like, people loving each other and taking care of each other.
Indeed. Um, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your motivations for this work, this specifically anti-violence work. I think you talked a little bit, again, you talked a little bit about your background and story, but what gets you up moving every day um, in this work?
So our work is primarily, I mean, we're here in DC. Our work is primarily with Black and Brown children in underserved communities, where that is the bulk of where gun violence and violence happens in our communities. And so it is, and they have always had this sense of survival
Ooh,
and
okay.
not thriving. They have, Black and Brown people have been surviving in this country for decades, for centuries, really. Since those boats hit the shore, it's been survival mode. And I don't want that for our kids. I don't want that for anybody to just basically survive in this world. This is a beautiful world in which folks deserve to thrive. They deserve, and in a city as rich as DC, that all needs are met. I was talking to a friend this morning, Maurice from Serve Your City, DC, and I said I struggled when I was a student at Howard University School of Divinity, and that's just a shameless plug. But when I was a student there, I heard a lot of talk and the word violence being used in so many different ways, economic violence,
Mm.
and things like that. And I just thought we just use this word so cavalierly. Like, it's not, violence is, I thought in my head, violence is violence. It is people forcing themselves on one another, forcing themselves on another person, killing another person. But then as I began to read and I began to study and I began to hear context of what they were talking about, we look at, and I thought, yeah, there is economic violence happening in the city. Because when we look at um, the food, what they call food deserts. And a friend made a really good point. Food doesn't grow in the desert, so why are we calling them food deserts, right?
Mm.
And we look at the different kind of violence that's happening. It's happening to our kids. They live in a ward with 2 grocery stores for 70,000 plus folks. This is where they live. Um, they don't have access to fresh fruits and different things that kids in Ward 3 have. They don't have the luxury of walking in their communities and not being conscious of their environment and where they are. Um, our kids call some of the local boys targets, and they
Wow.
know how to stay away from the targets. They know, I mean, no 8-year-old should know when to duck
Mm.
and
Oh,
when,
that's
yeah,
that's an impactful statement for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But looking at those things, that violence, it's not just physical violence. And the argument can be made not having access to um, food is physical violence, because you need those things to survive and to focus. I mean, I know that I'm grumpy and I'm unfocused when I'm hungry. So just imagine a child going to school and they're unfocused because they're hungry, because they didn't eat the night before and they don't know if they're going to eat the next day. When we talk about the word violence, it over the years it's had to grow and be redefined in many ways, not just to rape and not just to gun violence or physical violence, but what our country has done to what they deem the least.
Yeah. I think that's heavy to sum it up in one word. And I think it's also important to share some of these stories of resilience
Yeah.
of the youth that you work with. I'd love to hear some of your shining moments with them.
Oh, yeah. So, what their parents called, I have, their parents really will say, I spoil their kids. I've done a number on their kids that they have to contend with at times, even down to buying a hot dog, what brand of hot dogs they buy. Like it's the funny stuff.
Yeah.
But that's just fun. Our kids, so our kids are tested for PTSD.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
by entering our program, they are tested for PTSD, and they score as if they live in a war zone, as if they had been in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
They score on those levels. And we've seen that a 9-month consistent touch of art therapy, individual therapy, we've seen some of those numbers drop by 11% for our kids, as much as 11% from that. And for me, that's a victory, because they are now, what we're doing is working, and they get, while we want them to heal, that's our primary goal of raising thriving, courageous children, and not resilient children, but thriving and courageous children, um, that they get to be children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They get however many hours, they get to be children, they get to be free, they get to dream, and they get to imagine what the world looks like. And for one of those, and so as I've watched them grow over the last what will be 5 years in November that they've been with me and with the organization, um, I've seen them grow into some of what they will be, looking at their promise. Um, I've seen the ones who aren't as vocal become vocal. I've seen them take up, because we told them they can take up whatever space that is theirs to take up in this world. And I've seen them do that. I've seen them change in different ways. Whereas we broke up fights the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Every day there was a fight and we had to break it up. They don't have fights anymore. They have words, and they use their words in different kind of ways. Um, And as one of our shyest, she's our oldest, she's in high school, and she was the shyest, but being able to sit on panels and talk about it, looking at these kids at a news conference, a press conference, and them be able to share their stories. Um, it's like, yeah, this is it. To be able to see them see the beauty in themselves, not what the world says because of where they live, but the beauty of who they are and who they're becoming over time, who they'll become. And as we bring people in to sit with them, and one story that I tell I think every opportunity I get, I'll tell it. Um, we have students from Howard University that come and volunteer with us. And hopefully COVID things will happen and our students from Howard can come back, right? And be in person with our kids again. But Arne, who is our oldest and she's in high school, she wants to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. And she had some, it's like, yeah, I want to be a doctor. And one day, a Howard University med student came to volunteer. She looked like Arne, same complexion, same hair texture, um, same build. It was like they were looking in a mirror at
Wow.
each other, and told her Arne wanted to be a doctor. She moves from OBGYN to cardiology, and she just moves back and forth from those two, what she wants to do. And I told Arne, well, she's a med student at Howard University, and her whole face lit up because she saw a reflection of herself, and she saw what could be and what was possible. She saw her in this Howard University medical student, and I did not see Arne up until that point smile as much as she smiled with that student. She sat with her and they talked the whole time. Arne will get tired of you after 5 minutes, but the whole time she was there for the after school program, she talked with her. And her world lit up simply because she saw a representation of herself and what was possible. Those are the shining moments for me. When our kids can see beyond their neighborhood and see what is possible in this life, and that they can get it too. They can do it too. Those are the shining moments.
Yeah. I thank you so much for sharing her story. I think seeing yourself reflected in something that you wish to be is something that a lot of folks take for granted. So appreciate you. I really appreciate you sharing that story. I think it's also important to note that, violence doesn't happen in a vacuum, and policies and programs need to change to help support communities. And I'm wondering, especially on the local level, what policy changes do you think are most important right now to address gun violence in our community?
Well, DC has the strictest gun policies, some of the strictest in the country. What our issue, because it's communal, it is looking at inequity in education and leveling the playing field there. It is in affordable housing and how folks live. It is those things, having access to grocery stores and the systemic issues that cause gun violence and that cause poverty. Those are some of, if we look at, there's no policy to ensure that grocery stores, they're grocery stores, right? It's just the work of joining groups that are fighting for them and to lend your voice to it. But in the inequality in education, you have the organization Black Swan. You have children They're young people who are fighting. When they say defund the police and reallocate the funds to counselors in the school to make sure the ratio of children who need counseling services, that the counselors are there, right? Those are, look into that, support that there are an adequate number of counselors. If you look at schools and communities impacted by gun violence, um, and if you ask the question, if you go classroom to classroom and ask who's lost a loved one to gun violence or been impacted by gun violence, I think you will probably get every hand raised. Every hand raised. And then it would probably be the hand of the teacher as well. You know, how are we retaining our teachers when they too are impacted, losing students and things? And so what mental health services are available to them and what trauma support is available to them? Those are, the education part is key. You know, we like to say education is a passport to a better life and a better opportunity. But right now, our kids in 5, 7, and 8 don't have that opportunity, or they have to go outside of the ward they live in, yeah, and spend most of their time traveling to get to those better opportunities when they should be right next door in their communities. And so I think on a policy end, we've got to look at our education, look at the inequality in education in our city. We have to look at affordable housing, who gets to live where, right? And why is poverty concentrated in certain wards? Why are there not affordable housing units in wards like Ward 3 and Ward 2? Two of the wealthier wards in our city. Why are these things possible? And then if we want ghost guns, and figuring out how we curb, we join. We're partners with Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action DC. And ghost guns are a problem. The ATF has made their recommendations, and we need to push for not just our city, but our country to do more and to be up on innovation and technology, because you can just buy these pieces and assemble them, and they're not traceable at all.
Yeah. So I think to sum it up in one word, equity in housing, equity in education, equity in access to just living your life, and being able to live in a safe community, I think is, if you want equity. We talk a lot about equity here at the Y. So thank you for sharing. I'd like to end this with a time where I really want you to tell the people that are here today, and when we share this out, like how they can support your work, whether that's time, money, volunteers. This is really your time to share what you need, and then if you have any like takeaway I call them calls to action. So this is what I need for you to do today. I want to give you a few minutes to do that.
Great. So we need all three. We are a new organization. We are a small organization. We need time, we need money, and we need volunteers. What makes my board crazy about me, and one of my board members she's on now, is that I dream big, because I think there are the possibilities are endless. We want to buy and purchase a building or a house in Ward 8 that will be our central operations point. Right now, we don't have the funds to do that. So if you guys know people in real estate, anybody who can write a nice big fat check, we will take that to open that house and to be able to serve a greater portion of our city as we move through. We like volunteers. We just want our volunteers to be have the vaccine, be vaccinated, be able to pass a background check before we introduce you to the space with our kids. We also take volunteers who write grants, who are accountants, who know the government and policy, as we are beginning to this year just rev up our policy piece, our advocacy and policy piece, and pull that together of what we believe needs to be done, a comprehensive plan around gun violence with those things that I've shared, education, affordable housing, and different things. So those are all the things that we need. And my call to action is simply this. You've got to be engaged in this fight. It can't be when it hits your corner. It can't be when it hits your corner, when it hits your life, then your hair's on fire and somebody needs to do something yesterday. Because this has been 4 decades in the city where gun violence has been steady. Over 100 people killed each year since the 80s. And so your hair can't be on fire when it hits your corner, or it disturbed your happy hour on 14th and U, or Adams Morgan. Your hair needs to be on fire now. It needs to be a problem now. You need to be engaged now in what it is. And the thing is that what we have and what I share with people is we've had a consistency of police through all of this. If policing was going to solve it, it would have been solved in the 80s. Policy. If policy was going to solve it, it would have been solved with Bill Clinton's crime bill. But it's still here and it's still with us now. So it's got to be us together, digging deep, looking for solutions that work. And dealing with the whole human, because nobody wakes up a killer. There are things that drove them to that point, and we need to figure those things out and help.
Yeah. Well, help others, help your community, and do it now, not just when it directly impacts you. I think is the nonprofit way. Let's get started today. So I thank everyone for coming and joining us today. I know we had some technical difficulties in the beginning, but such is life around here. I really invite you to go and learn more about the center and their work. You can visit their website or join them on or follow them on social media. They do great, phenomenal work. I'm so excited to hopefully continue a partnership with them here at the Y. We're doing anti-violence work this whole week as we do every day of the year here at the YWCA. So I invite you to join us tomorrow with domestic violence wears many tags is going to take over. She knows they're going to take over our Instagram for a while tomorrow. So please join us back here to see what they're going to share about their work specifically in the domestic violence arena. And then, as always, the YWCA appreciates your support and support of our mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. So if you are able or so inclined, you can visit our website to donate to our work. And that's ywcanca.org/donate now. So appreciate you all. See you on the channels soon. Thanks.